Welcome to the EQ Fit podcast. Our mission is to equip people to prosper in every aspect of their life. Whether you're at home or in the workplace, we explore practical ways of improving success, satisfaction, finding balance, and building enjoyable and beneficial relationships. Thank you for joining us. So today I want to talk about empathy. Empathy is a critical skill of emotional intelligence and, frankly, just a critical relationship skill. Empathy is a skill that allows us and really moves us to practice good listening skills, because empathy is caring about other people's feelings, their perspectives, what's going on with them. It doesn't mean we have to change what we do to whatever somebody else feels or thinks, but it does give us understanding of the other person. And when people ask me about empathy, there's a lot of different definitions of that with people. I think there's a lot of confusion. And, people will say, okay, what is empathy? How do I practice it? What value is there by practicing empathy? And a lot of times empathy and sympathy will get mixed up. And I want to make sure that we're clear on the differences here in this context. It's an easy way to think of differentiating the two by thinking sympathy is more detached, where empathy is more engaged and involved, where you're really showing an involvement and engagement with the other person, active listening, asking good questions to understand, gaining understanding through that process so that you can get better insight into where the other person is coming from. Whereas sympathy is sometimes almost a one-off. I'm sorry you're going through that. Hope it gets better. That's sympathy. Empathy is, tell me about that. What's going on for you? How are you feeling about that? And I know a lot of people get uptight when they ask feeling or emotions questions, but bottom line, emotions are a part of our everyday life. And there's a 6 Seconds, the organization that I use for EQ assessments and for a lot of materials and things that I use, and I've actually created an assessment using their platform. It's a global emotional intelligence organization. Here's how they define empathy. And they've been doing this a long time. Recognizing and appropriately responding to others' emotions. And let me add to that something that I think is important. And that is, yes, exactly recognizing and appropriately responding to others' emotions. But I would also add other people's perspectives, their perceptions of things. Empathy is a process of being curious, not judgmental. It's an authentic caring about the other person's feelings and perspectives. Not just I guess I have to listen to this. That's not practicing empathy. If you've already decided what you're going to do and you're just trying to shut out the noise, that's not practicing empathy. Empathy is a great leadership skill. It engages with people. It's a magnet that draws people in, whether it's leadership or relationships, whatever that happens to be. Now, if you roll into that some compassion, some grace, you get a better feel for what empathy applied actually looks like. How well do you listen to other people? Are you thinking about the next thing you're going to say when somebody else is talking, or are you truly listening to gain insight and understanding? There's a huge difference between those two. Can you understand the situation from their perspective? You don't have to agree with it, but can you understand it from their perspective? And then how do you respond to them? So, why is empathy important? Here's a few reasons. It facilitates quality relationships. And think about it. Relationships are a give and take. If you're in a relationship with someone, especially if it's an intimate or personal relationship, there is a give and take flow that is going on. And empathy really helps in that. I laugh about this, but one of the things I learned a long time ago with my wife is she really doesn't need me to fix everything, although I think that's what she needs. So I have learned to practice empathy and listen and let her talk it out so that I don't go into fix it mode, because that's what I like to do. And I think a lot of you out there listening to this, if you're honest with yourself, you're probably in that same place. Well, just fix it. It's easy. Just do this. It'll fix it. Now we can move on. But that's not always what people need. They don't necessarily always need a fix. Or another way to look at that, maybe the fix is on a lot deeper level. Maybe it's on an emotional level and they're dealing with a lot of things that they need to express and get out so that they can start to find the right path forward as far as that situation goes. There's another thing to look at here. Empathy being important in gaining better insight into what others are experiencing. One thing I learned fairly early in life is there's a lot of hard lessons in life that you could actually learn from other people and not go through that pain yourself if you choose to. You can learn from other people's experiences. You can also gain better insight into what's driving them, their emotional drivers, their survival drivers, whatever's going on for them. The more you can understand that by practicing empathy and listening well, asking good questions to gain insight, and really connecting well with other people to gain that understanding, that's going to help a lot in the way that you relate to that individual, the way that you communicate with them, the way that you connect with them. Here's another benefit of empathy: the ability to have crucial conversations or difficult conversations that bring good results. A lot of people, me included at times, shy away from those difficult conversations. They're not fun, but if we practice empathy, so again, back to curiosity versus judgment, if we practice empathy, we have a much better chance at having those difficult conversations with good outcomes than if we're just judgmental and head down that pathway. Here's another benefit of practicing empathy. And I want you to notice that I use the term practicing empathy. Empathy is not something that you just have. You either have it or you don't. Everybody can grow their competency in empathy. Everybody can. You just have to practice it. You have to use it. It's like any kind of skill where if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And we don't want that, do we? We want to build this skill to get better at it so that we can use it more effectively. So increasing leadership effectiveness. Now, yeah, that could be in an organization or a team or a business, but it could also be at home. The more that you practice empathy and understanding where others are coming from and what feelings they're having and how that's impacting them, you have a much better chance at leading them well. And leadership is not an authoritarian position. It is a practice. It is an influential practice. And empathy can be a huge part of that. If you look at really great leaders, they connect really well with people and they practice empathy. Here's another benefit of empathy. It enhances collaboration and connection with people. Just being able to work with people well, do things in a way that's productive and bringing people together. And then another one, and of course there's many more than this, but another very important one is trust building. Empathy is a big, big lever to pull when you are building trust. Now, I could go on, but the fact is that we as human beings are created to be in community with other people. For us and for them to enjoy that connection and that community, we need to practice empathy. Have you ever tried to build a relationship based on just what you wanted? How well did that work? I'm guessing not very well. One-sided relationships don't work very well most of the time. Even if you have authority over someone else, are you really getting their best work, their best input, their best effort if all you're doing is all about you? Relationships are a two-way street where each person invests in the relationship. Have you noticed that the strongest relationships are based on giving instead of getting? Especially when both people are giving equally to each other. That is based in empathy. How can you give effectively to someone else when you don't understand what they truly need? And I think that's a question we need to ask ourselves on a regular basis. Empathy is a doorway. It's a doorway to understanding other people and all of the intricacies of someone else. You do not have to agree with them or compromise your beliefs or your values. That's not what I'm suggesting. But to effectively connect with other people, we need to be able to understand where are they coming from? What is driving them? What are they feeling right now? What is impacting their life? What is the emotional environment that they're living in? So that brings us to a very practical question. How do we practice empathy? So remembering that relationships are a two-way street and that it takes an investment of yourself by both people, an investment of self by both people to build a strong relationship. We keep that in the forefront of your mind. However, that does not stop you from practicing empathy. Empathy is not dependent on the other person receiving it. And I think that's really important. If you feel like you're practicing good listening skills and trying to understand people, but it doesn't seem to be working very well, you're still practicing empathy. You're still being effective in what you're doing by practicing empathy, but they have to engage with you in that process. It's a way you invest in the other person. It is your choice to practice empathy with them. It's almost like forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't necessarily for the other person. If they did something wrong to you and you're forgiving them, forgiveness is for you. It isn't for them. They don't deserve it if they did something wrong. But it really is getting your head in the right place, your emotions in the right place, creating the emotional environment that you really want to live in. Here's some things to look for when we're talking about empathy and the practice of empathy. How often do you suppress your emotions? You just press them down and push them down. That's not really practicing empathy for other people, because if you're putting all that under pressure, it's going to come out at some point, and it's probably not going to come out the way you want it to. Do you avoid thinking about emotions? Do you place more merit on rational data over emotional data? All of this is important because empathy is a management system around emotions. It's a way to identify what emotions are going on and what's happening for the other person, and then fitting that into your emotional environment. Are you more judgmental or more curious? When people you interact with come out of an interaction with you, how do they behave? How do they feel after they've had that connection with you? What level of care do you have for other people? Is what you want more important than what someone else wants? Do you feel like other people just don't understand? How important is it for you to be right? Now, obviously, when I ask those questions, these are roadblocks to practicing empathy. And I waited till the end of reading those bullet points to help you see that, yeah, sometimes this or that might get in the way of me practicing empathy. And it probably won't be all of these things for you, but we all have something that tends to be a roadblock for us in practicing that empathetic approach towards other people. All of these are good checks on your ability and capacity to practice empathy. You can see where many of these will come down to how important are your interests over the other person's interests. In short, your self-focus over somebody else's focus or what's important to them. So empathy is a practice. As you practice it more and more, you develop more capacity for it and you develop more strength in that competency of practicing empathy. So as we start to tie this up and kind of close it out today, I want you to think about something. Empathy is a two-way street. On our EQ Fit YouTube channel, that's just go to YouTube and type in @EQ you will find some videos, some short videos and some longer videos on empathy and the practice of empathy. But there's one specifically that talks about empathy as a two-way street. Think about that for a minute. You can practice empathy with other people all day long, but are you doing that with yourself? Are you giving yourself empathy? There are specific actions and choices you can make to practice empathy and to grow this EQ skill. Number one, be curious instead of judgmental. Number two, check your bias. You may not believe the same things that other people do, but that does not make them less important or worth less respect. Respect is a companion to empathy. If you're truly going to practice empathy, it has to be from a respectful place. Now, the other person may be totally wrong in their perceptions and the way they're thinking, but we still respect them as a person. If we respect other people, it is much easier to practice empathy with them. Understand that as well as you know someone, there is still much about them that you do not know. Their current beliefs and the rules they live by, their self-talk, their current emotional environment, what personal issues may be impacting them, their stress levels, what triggers strong emotions for them, what embedded patterns they may have, what triggers are there and patterns are there for them, past experiences or trauma in their lives. There's a lot we don't know about other people, and that includes the people closest to us. I am still discovering new things about my wife, things that I've never known before or heard before. And that's a good thing. That keeps the relationship fresh. Here's another way to look at practicing empathy. Come up with new patterns for yourself to choose to practice empathy. Don't negate the needs of others. Take time to connect and understand the other person. Believe that you can operate with empathy. Don't just say, oh, I'm no good at that, or I got a low score on an EQ test about empathy, so I don't have that ability. That's an excuse. And there is no excuse for not growing your skill and competency of empathy. That's just, it's kind of a cop-out, to be honest about it. It's you saying, it's not worth it to me. I'm more important than other people. I'm not going to worry about that. I don't even want to put effort into that. You can kind of come to understand where I'm coming from as far as that goes. People are important. People deserve investment in them from each of us. Come up with a few questions that will open the door to better understanding of the other person's situation, their perspective, and their feelings. So create some questions for yourself that are more curiosity based. Stay away from judgment. Don't slap a label on somebody. You don't know them all that well, or maybe you do and there's still a lot you don't know, or there are things changing in their lives. So practice empathy. Reflect on how you practice empathy after the interaction. I think that's really important. Come out of a connection or an interaction with someone. How well did I do practicing empathy with that person? Do I understand their situation? Do I understand their perceptions? Do I understand their position and what they're thinking about where they are right now? Do I understand their feelings and how that's impacting them? If you can answer those questions, you've done a great job of practicing empathy. Empathy is a skill that can be learned and it can be grown, so there's no excuse not to practice empathy. The greater your capacity and ability to practice empathy, the greater your opportunity to have a more successful and enjoyable life. And I think that's what we all want. Thank you for joining us for this episode. If you have any questions about this week's episode, or maybe a suggestion for future episodes you'd like us to explore, please contact us through our website at eqfit.org. For more information and inspiration, connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube at EQFit.